Okay, so welcome to part 2 of the notes, and I'm going to start out by messing with your head um, because this slide talks about the color of sunlight, and I just want to make you think for a minute. Think about why you see color. You're looking at this slide and you can see that the word water looks blue and the words carbon dioxide look red and chlorophyll looks green. Think about why they have color. And then I'm going to tell you that nothing really does have color. The reason that you see color is because the wavelength of light that the molecules in that object reflect is what your eyes perceive. So the word chlorophyll appears green to you because the molecules there are reflecting green light to your eye. If you look in my classroom and you look at the signs by my telephone, there's a pink one and there's an orange one. That pink paper, the molecules are constructed in such a way that they reflect pink light. So the paper itself doesn't have color, but it's reflecting pink wavelengths of light to your eye, and that's why you see color. So I'll let you digest that for a second as we continue on with photosynthesis. So chlorophyll, we had mentioned, is a pigment. It's a green pigment in plants. There are other types of chlorophyll, but the one we're going to be concerned about is the green one. So green chlorophyll is actually going to absorb all colors of light except for green. It reflects green, okay? So when chlorophyll is absorbing red and blue and the other colors, it's actually absorbing that energy, okay? So in addition to water and carbon dioxide, photosynthesis will require light and chlorophyll, which is a pigment in chloroplasts. Sunlight, which your eyes perceive as white light, is actually a mixture of different wavelengths of light of various colors. So when don't look at the sun, but when you see sunlight, that's actually all of the colors combined. And you can tell that all those colors are there when you see a rainbow, because the water particles in the sky actually separate those wavelengths of light into different colors. So any compound that absorbs light is also going to absorb energy from that light. When chlorophyll absorbs light, much of that energy is transferred directly to the electrons that exist in chlorophyll molecules, raising the energy of these electrons. These electrons start moving a little bit faster. And these high energy electrons can make photosynthesis work. So now let's take a look at this graph. Okay, and the question here is asking, how well would a plant grow under pure yellow light? Well, let's look at the graph and see what it's showing us. The title, Absorption of Light by Chlorophyll A and Chlorophyll B. So I did tell you before that there are different types of chlorophyll, and sometimes they absorb different wavelengths of light. Along the y-axis, it says estimated absorption in percent, so from 0% to 100% absorption. And then the x-axis is the wavelength. And then below that is showing you the colors. We've got violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. The question again, how well would a plant grow under pure yellow light? Well, let's see where yellow is. It's at about 600 nanometers for the wavelength. That's kind of low as far as estimated absorption, right? It's kind of, for both of them, it's like 5% absorption. So if it's only absorbing 5% of that wavelength, is that really a good place or good color to grow a plant? Probably not. And now let's ask this question. What color wavelength of light would be the best to grow a plant? If you were to pick a colored light bulb to grow a plant underneath, what color would you want to pick? And there's a couple colors that are actually really good, but probably blue would be the best color. And that's not something you would automatically think of because plants are green and sunlight is very bright, and I don't think your brain automatically goes, I think blue light would be the best one to grow plants in. but blue happens to be very well absorbed, specifically by chlorophyll B. If you're looking for absorption levels for chlorophyll A, you could pick red or violet light, and it would work very well for that type of chlorophyll. But that's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. You could even do your own experiment at home to see, the different color. You could find different colored light bulbs and grow plants and see which one they really like. I bet you'll find it's the blues or the reds that they grow best under. Okay, another question. The graph represents the absorption spectrum of chlorophyll, so it's a very similar graph to the last one. The graph indicates that the energy used in photosynthesis is most likely obtained from which regions of the spectrum. So again, the y-axis is the percent of absorption, and at the bottom they're not giving you numbers this time, they're just giving you colors. So let's go back and look at the question again. The graph indicates that the energy used in photosynthesis is most likely obtained from which regions of the spectrum. So it's plural, regions. So we're looking for multiple areas where photosynthesis is going to get energy. Those would be the peaks that you see. So somewhere in the blues, orange, red, okay? So let's look at choice 1, yellow and orange, red. No. Number 2, violet, blue, and green. Green, no way. 3, orange, red, and violet, blue. That's a definite possibility. Let's go to our last choice, green and yellow. Those are the absolute worst colors. Okay, so we know choice 3 is the best one. All right, so there's different factors that affect photosynthesis. So not only the color of the light, but also the intensity. How bright is that light? This time of year where we live, the intensity of the light that's hitting our part of the planet is rather low. And that's why our plants are seasonal, because they sense that there's less direct light hitting this part of our planet, and they kind of go into hibernation mode. They lose their leaves, they just kind of stop functioning or very slow functioning for the winter. But other factors is the amount of water and the temperature. So if you don't water your plant enough, they're not going to be able to photosynthesize much. Same thing with temperature. If you increase the temperature really, really high, the plants are not going to want to go through photosynthesis a whole heck of a lot. And if you drop the temperature too low, they will not be able to go through photosynthesis. So those are different factors. You should know these. They do ask this type of a question on the Regents exam where you have to explain how these factors can affect photosynthesis. Okay, question. A green plant is kept in a brightly lighted area for 48 hours, so 2 days. What will most likely occur if the light intensity is then reduced slightly during the next 48 hours or during the next 2 days? So the first 2 days it's kept in a very bright area, the next 2 days it's less bright. Number 1, photosynthesis will stop completely. I don't know, it just says the light intensity is reduced. It doesn't mean it's pitch black. So I'm going to say probably not number 1. Number 2, the rate at which nitrogen is used by the plant will increase. Well, we know if we think about the formula for photosynthesis, the plant isn't really using nitrogen in that process. So number 2 is not going to be an answer for us. Number 3, the rate at which oxygen is released from the plant will decrease. Well, let's think about our formula for photosynthesis again. Does oxygen get released? Well, carbon dioxide goes in and oxygen comes out, so yeah. And it says the rate at which oxygen is released will decrease. So it doesn't say it will stop, it just says decrease. So that's a possible answer. Let's read number 4 though. Glucose production inside each plant cell will increase. Well, if you're reducing the amount of light, that means photosynthesis will probably slow down, and that means glucose production will probably slow down also. So number 4 is not a good answer. So 3 is the best answer out of all these choices. All right, another question. If the leaves of a geranium plant receive an adequate supply, adequate means enough, an adequate supply of raw materials, which graph below shows how the rate of photosynthesis is related to increasing light intensity received by the plant. Okay, so they're saying a geranium plant is getting lots of materials that it needs. Now all you're trying to measure is the intensity of light. So on these graphs, light intensity goes low at the left, higher towards the right, okay? And how do you think the rate of photosynthesis would be? So if we have a low light intensity, you're probably going to have a low rate of photosynthesis. If we have a high light intensity, you're probably going to have a high rate of photosynthesis. So which graph looks like low light, low photosynthesis, and then high light intensity, high rate of photosynthesis? Graph C is going to be your best choice. All right, so we're going to summarize all of this stuff a little bit here on this slide. So what does a plant need to survive? It needs to be able to bring in carbon dioxide, it needs to bring in water, and it needs to absorb light. It needs to get rid of oxygen, and it needs to move around the sugars that it's making. Okay, so it's got different adaptations for doing these things. It has leaves that are going to help. It has the shoot part, and inside that shoot you can see these purple streaks. Those are actually kind of its vascular system. Just like we have veins, arteries, and capillaries, plants have their own vascular system to help transport things. They don't have a heart that moves things. Their way of moving things is by gravity and by evaporation of water and stuff like that. So down at the bottom we have our formula again. Carbon dioxide and water with light will produce glucose and oxygen. Okay, so this is the cross-section view of a leaf, because we know that plants have leaves that will help participate in photosynthesis. One of the major ways they do this is having chloroplasts inside the leaf cells to absorb the sun's energy. But there's other structures in here that help with photosynthesis. So let's look at the structure itself. I'm looking at the left side of the leaf, and these different layers are labeled. And I did tell you we are going to do a lab where you'll be looking at leaf structures. So the very top outside layer of the leaf is called the cuticle. And it's kind of got a waxy, smooth appearance to it. And that helps to conserve water, actually. It's going to block water from evaporating too quickly out of the leaf. The next little thin layer down is the epidermis. It's the outside, it's kind of like your epidermis, your skin. And then we have a layer of cells called the palisades layer. And these cells are kind of packed tightly together, and they're located right at the top surface of the leaf. This is where the most photosynthesis in the leaf can occur because the light can reach this part. These guys are going to have a lot of chloroplasts inside of them. And then we have the spongy layer. These cells will have a few chloroplasts in them, but they're spaced apart, and there's a lot of gaps in there. And the gaps are important because this is where the gases that are needed for photosynthesis can move around, and the gases that are going to be released out of the cells for photosynthesis, this is where they're going to be hanging out as well. And you can see we've got oxygen and water that have been produced. They're going to be leaving the cell. And then we've got carbon dioxide that's entering the cell, or the plant, sorry, in the spongy layer. So the gases can move in and out. There's something called transpiration. I want you to add what the definition of transpiration is down at the bottom. Transpiration is the evaporation of water from the leaf. So transpiration is the evaporation of water from a leaf. So water, when it leaves the plant in the leaf, it leaves through a hole called a stomate. So next to stomate, you can write down a hole in the bottom of a leaf. And then next to that, we have a guard cell. And the guard cell, they're pointing to it next to the hole, next to the stomate. And guard cells are actually going to control the size of the stomate. If the guard cells allow that stomate to open, then there will be more gas exchange. If the guard cell shuts that stomate, then gas exchange is not going to occur inside and outside of that leaf. And I'll talk about the reasons why a guard cell might do those things. And then we have this circular thing in the center of our cross section, and it's made of two structures, xylem and phloem. These two structures together, you're going to add this too, xylem and phloem together make a vascular bundle. So the xylem and phloem have different functions. They help transport water and sugar. So xylem is going to transport water up from the roots, and the phloem is going to help transport sugar throughout the plant. I want you to add that to their definitions there. So xylem transports water up from the roots, and the phloem will transport sugar throughout the plant. Okay, now more details about stomates and guard cells. Stomates, their function is to let carbon dioxide in, to let oxygen out, to let water out, and to help prevent dehydration. The pictures that you see here are actually images from like the bottom surface of a leaf. And the lab that we do will actually be looking at these. And they kind of look like a pair of lips or an eyeball. And if you look at the top right-hand picture, you can see the stomate is open in the one image and kind of closed in the other. If it's open, it's going to allow more carbon dioxide in, more oxygen out, and more water out. If it's closed, it's not going to allow those. It's going to prevent dehydration. Okay? Just another set of diagrams. The bottom picture is just super cool. That's an electron microscope image of the guard cell, the two guard cells. The orange structures there are the guard cells on either side of the stomate. So there's actually two guard cells there, one on each side of that hole, that stomate, that control how open or closed it is. Here's a diagram showing the xylem. You just need to remember that it transports water. And then we've got the phloem that is going to be conducting the sugars around the plant wherever they're needed. It's going to help in creating new leaves, and it'll help move the sugar to the fruit and help build fruit. And it'll help make seeds as well. It's going to transport nutrients to make seeds. So if we take and put everything together, it's kind of considered, how does a plant make a living? It needs sunlight. The leaves are going to be our solar collectors, and the process is called photosynthesis. The gases, we need carbon dioxide in, oxygen out, and the stomates are going to be the ones controlling what goes in and what goes out. Water, H2O. The roots are going to bring water up from the soil, and it's pulled up by leaf evaporation. Next to leaf evaporation, I want you to write transpiration again. So water coming out of the leaves at the top of this plant, that is called transpiration. That's how water gets drawn up from the roots. And then nutrients. Obviously, plants also need nutrients, and that those different vitamins and minerals and things that are in the soil, the roots are going to help absorb those as well. Okay, so this diagram is now connecting respiration, which remember is not breathing. This is what's occurring inside your mitochondria. How is respiration connected to photosynthesis? Let's take a look. Respiration requires glucose and oxygen. Wait a second. I've seen those two combined somewhere else. Take a look at the end result of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is making glucose and oxygen. Respiration needs glucose and oxygen. Ah, that's interesting, right? And now let's look at what respiration is making. Respiration is making carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. Wait, what does photosynthesis need? Photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide and water. There's where the relationship is. basically reverse reactions of each other. So if you know photosynthesis, if you flip it and run it backwards, then you will know what cellular respiration is. Here's another diagram showing in a different way how they are related. So let's start with the sun. The sun is giving energy to photosynthesis, or to the plants. And then we go clockwise. Photosynthesis is going to produce glucose and release oxygen. And if we keep following the arrow, glucose is going to be required, and so is oxygen, for cellular respiration. Cellular respiration occurs in all organisms, animals and plants, and they're going to be making ATP. They're going to produce carbon dioxide and water, which are then needed for photosynthesis. At this point, we're done with the notes for Chapter 8. I would like you to take the photosynthesis quiz and make sure you have your notes in front of you. They're going to help you tremendously.